Hey everyone, it's Tim from Linessa Farms Specialty and Heirloom Livestock. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. This is actually Wednesday. Thanksgiving is tomorrow, but you know, when I think about Thanksgiving here on our farm, I think of it as a major transition period for us. This is really when we start switching into that mindset of having our lambs and having our kids. Now here on Linessa Farms, we normally have our babies in the December, January timeframe. So this is telling me that I have about 2 to 3 weeks to go before babies start hitting the ground, and it's time for me to really get ready to go. Now, if you've watched our channel before, you know that I don't get into a lot of controversial subjects. I don't get into, you know, like this is absolutely, without a doubt, things that you have to do, but today I want to kind of shift gears and get away from that. You know, we get a lot of questions. A lot of you are just learning. We see lots and lots of bad info out there on the internet. And I just want to kind of sum some things up, and I know I'm going to get beat up a little bit about this because I know a lot of you, that's not true. I know some of you are not going to agree with what I have to say today, but here's the deal. These are my personal 10 tips that you absolutely have to follow. These. If you don't follow these 10 basic steps when it comes to raising sheep and goats, you are going to either end up with an extremely hurt animal, a sick animal, or worst case scenario, you're going to end up with dead animals. These 10 tips that we're going to talk about today are things that I consider you absolutely have to follow. So with that being said, stay tuned to find out more. All right, so step number one, and this is maybe surprising to some of you, but I personally feel this is one of the most important. And if you ask my helpers, anyone that's ever worked with me on the farm, and I ask them, what is the number one rule of raising sheep and goats? Without a doubt, every single one of them is going to tell you, don't chase the sheep and goats. And why are we so married to this idea of not chasing the sheep and goats? Well, there's multiple reasons. Intuitively, you can probably understand that chasing sheep and goats is very hard on you, and it's just kind of a pain in the butt. But the reality of it is chasing them around is very, very hard on the animals. It's very stressful for them. They're going to run from you. They're going to be afraid of you. There's a good chance that they're going to get caught up in something. They're going to get hurt. And actually, the more and more you chase them around, the more and more spun up they get, and the worse it gets. The other thing is if you have a system for catching your animals and sorting your animals, you're going to be far more apt to do the things that you need to do to keep an eye on them, be it check them for worms, give them vaccinations, sort them out as needed, trim hooves, fill in the blank. You know, a lot of you have this anxiety when it comes to doing things with your animals because you know catching them is a major pain. The other thing to consider is if they get hurt or if they're in the process of having babies and you need to get a handle on them, it can be very difficult to do. Now, I'm standing in front of a little catch area right here just to show you how simple this is. This is one of our portable areas that we set up when we're processing our animals. It is simply made with hog panels, T-posts, and zip ties. I can tear this down in a couple minutes and move it anywhere that I need to move it. We have a video talking about catching animals, and it is located right here. Don't make this any more difficult on yourself than you have to. It is an absolute must that you have an area or you have a system where you can catch your animals without a lot of stress to you and without a lot of stress to them. You do not need a multi-$1,000 containment system or catch pens or chutes or anything like that. You can simply get it done using some inexpensive panels, T-posts, and zip ties. So I highly, highly encourage you to do that because a lot of the other things that we're going to talk about are going to kind of feed off of this. So with that being said, let's move on to point number 2. All right, so point number 2 that I want to talk with you about, very, very important. Do not feed on the ground. And I know this is difficult for some of you. Some of you just take your grain and you throw it down on the ground. That's a big no-no. And there's different ways that you can do this. You can feed in troughs. So I have a trough right here that I've drilled some holes in. This is a good way to feed grain. Over here I have my hay and grain feeder. And so I just wanted to kind of show you this really quick. This is a great way to keep your feet off of the ground, and I highly advise making something like this for yourself, regardless of the size of your farm. You could even split this in half. This bunk feeder is 8 foot long. I've made this myself, and you can see I've got the wire panels in here, so I can simply take my hay and just drop it in there, and the animals will just come up and eat the hay and pull it through. The other thing that I can do that works out really nice is I can utilize this tray down here to actually put my grain in, so I keep it off the ground. So what's the big deal with keeping our feet off the ground? Well, all kinds of things are in the ground that we're wanting to avoid. Things like worms, coccidia, all kinds of different disease, mold. You know, you're looking at, there's so many things. You know, you're looking at E. coli, listeria, Clostridium, just all kinds of things that are in the ground. So do yourself a favor. I don't care what you have to do it, but keep your feet off the ground. It is very, very important. And with that being said, point number 3 is you have to feed hay. And as you can see, I brought my hay out here and they're nibbling on it now. You can limit some things when it comes to raising sheep and goats, but I don't want you to ever go a day without feeding them hay. And that's real hay, like roughage. They have to have some kind of roughage. Hay pellets, we sell those through our online store. They're fantastic. I love them. They're made out of pure alfalfa, but it doesn't do the job. Hay pellets are not the same as hay. You absolutely have to feed hay every single day, and that is because it helps to produce saliva, which acts as a bicarbonate, and it keeps the rumen acidity where it needs to be. So with that being said, that's our number 2 and number 3 rules that you absolutely must follow. Don't feed on the ground, and make sure that you feed hay every single day. At a rule of thumb, you're going to want to feed 1 flake. That's one of these, 1 flake per head per day of hay. Now, with that being said, let's move on to point number 4. All right, so now is when we're getting into the ones that some of you are going to disagree with me about, and that's point number 4, and that is vaccinations. I don't care what you vaccinate for, but there is one that I absolutely insist that you vaccinate, and that is CD&T. That's the Clostridium type C and D and tetanus. We have videos talking about the Clostridium type C and D that you can see right here. If you haven't watched it yet, I highly advise that you do so. And tetanus is one of those things that you just can't avoid as well. It is not worth losing animals over. If you're an anti-vaxxer, that's... I don't know what to say. I'm not going to get into that argument with you, but if you are not vaccinated against Clostridium and tetanus, eventually, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it will come back to bite you and it will kill your animals. I don't really know what else to say about that other than you're playing with fire and eventually you're going to get burned. I normally am not too much of a stickler on some things, and I do respect everyone's individual choices. And with that being said, if you lose animals, you lose animals. But I want to make sure that you go into this with a mindset knowing that you're playing with fire and eventually you're going to get burned. So vaccinations for Clostridium, you're going to vaccinate the babies when they're about 8 and 10 weeks of age if they're on mom, and then you're going to do your annual vaccination booster a few weeks out from having babies. So with that being said, let's move on to our next point. All right, so our next point, probably the most controversial one that we're going to talk about today, chemical wormers. There is a place on your farm for chemical wormers, and if you have a mindset that I'm never going to use chemical wormers, let me tell you a little story. You guys know that we have the Tack box, which is our online forum that a lot of people talk to us through, and you know that we have our Facebook page. But let me tell you something, on the back side, on the back end of our business, we get lots and lots of private emails and private messages from individuals that are having problems on their farm that don't put it out there in public. We get I can't even tell you how many, a lot. We get lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of messages all the time about animals that are dying with a worm load. And 90% of the time, it's individuals that have a mindset of, I am not going to give a chemical wormer to my animal. And then they call us freaking out when the animal's dying, and they end up, usually the animal ends up dead. But if they don't end up dead, then they start using chemical wormers. There is a place for chemical wormers. If you have the mindset that, I'm never going to use a chemical wormer, that's fine. You're going to fall into the same boat that you fall into with the CDT, and that is eventually you're going to end up with dead animals. So again, you're playing with fire, and eventually you're going to get burned. I am not telling you to just nuke your animals with chemical wormer all the time. I am not telling you to give inappropriate amounts of chemical wormer. We have videos upon videos upon videos of chemical wormers. We have a video that we put out recently about our comprehensive method to worming. You can see it right here. I try to minimize my chemical worming as much as possible. There's a certain amount of time that I chemical worm. Once I get the animals up to speed, I try to switch over to the copper sulfate wormer as much as possible to try to avoid giving them a chemical wormer. I don't want to give chemical wormers. I understand. I don't want to give my animals any chemicals at all. But the reality is if I have to choose between giving them a chemical or watching them suffer and die, I am going to give them a chemical every day of the week. So I understand the mentality, but again, I'm just telling you, and go ahead and send us the email when you get in trouble, and we'll do our best to help you out. But I'm telling you right now, if you have the mentality that you're never going to give a chemical wormer and there's no place for it on your farm, you're going to eventually end up with dead animals. With that being said, let's move on to our next point. All right, and on the same note that we're talking about the I'm never going to give wormers, we also have individuals that say I'm never going to give an antibiotic. And again, same thing. If you are of the mindset that you are never, ever, ever going to give an antibiotic, no matter what, you are eventually going to end up with dead animals. You're also going to end up with abortions. It's something that can't be avoided. There are 2 times that you should definitely consider giving antibiotics. One is Aeromycin crumbles, 4-gram crumbles that we highly advise going into lambing or kidding. This helps to clean up the mom, helps to prevent certain types of abortion from chlamydia, toxoplasmosis, and other things like that. The other time that you're going to want to consider antibiotics is just for basic crud that you're going to get, outbreaks that you're going to get on your farm due to pneumonia or other issues. So you should keep antibiotic on hand on your farm at all times. If you're going to pick just a antibiotic, just a single antibiotic to keep on your farm that's relatively inexpensive to get, I would say you want to get some kind of oxytetracycline, which would be LA200 or a generic LA200 that you can get at any of your farm supply stores. You can buy it over the counter. It's relatively inexpensive. So if you're going to get one and you're going to keep it on hand, I highly, highly advise LA200 or the generic LA200, which is the oxytetracycline. All right, to our next point, grain. Grain helps a lot. If you have never fed grain to your animals, if you are just a grass-fed gal or guy, I want you to consider feeding a little bit of grain. Not a lot. If you don't want to feed a lot, consider 1/2 pound per head per day. And I am here to tell you, you will see a significant difference in the overall growth characteristics and overall health of your animals. I understand that some of you are very anti-grain and you don't want to feed it, and you've been told on your forums that, grain is bad and you shouldn't do it or whatever. That's just not true. And as a matter of fact, grain is going to help you out a lot. With that being said, kind of to segue on that, not necessarily a different point, but on the same note, medicated feed. So we already talked about antibiotics, but we've also spent some time in the past talking about coccidia and coccidia medication that comes in feed form that we sell it here through our store, and you can get it through all kinds of other stores. It is very, very important as well. So again, if you're not feeding grain, try it. Try it with 1 or 2. Just get your feet wet with it. See how big of a difference this makes and how much more you get. I always tell people, feed 1 flake per head per day of that hay. But then if you want to put your money somewhere, if you really want to get the best bang for your buck, absolutely hands down the best thing that you can do is put that money into grain. Don't put that money into more hay. It's a waste of your time, it's a waste of your money. Take that extra money, put it towards grain, and you're going to see some fantastic results, I promise. All right, so going off of the antibiotics and the medicated feed and the grain and all of that, next point I want to make is this. These are not wild animals anymore. These are domesticated animals, and you're going to run into this a lot on forums and with individuals that you talk to, and they're going to start to say things to you like, well, when they were wild animals and lived out on the pastures, blah, 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 blah. Or when they were wild and lived out in the free world and ate what, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, those days are over. Sorry. They're domesticated animals now. We have long bred that out of them. As a matter of fact, if you want to breed that back into them, that is an extremely tough row to hoe. And there are people that successfully do it. But for you to buy a domesticated sheep or domesticated goat off of an individual and just think, you know, you're going to be free and you're going to be all natural and you're just going to throw them out on a pasture and just let them go and be free, they are going to die. And the reason for that is they haven't been raised that way. They haven't been bred that way. So unless you specifically have animals that were bred, raised, culled, and developed to be worm resistant and on pasture, and you can prove that personally, and I say that because that's something that you need to consider, then you can go that route. But what am I trying to tell you here in a nutshell? What I'm trying to tell you is people will lie to you and people will rip you off. And people will tell you things like, I don't feed any grain at all, or I never worm at all. Well, that's great. That's fine and dandy, but you better darn well keep an eye on your animals until you can prove that that's actually the case on your farm before you just go throwing them out there to the wolves and leaving them with no medicine, no checking or anything, because one of these days you're going to go out there and you're going to find dead animals or really sick animals. There are very few farms in the United States that truly have worm-resistant animals that don't require medication, or animals that can free range and have babies and just eat off of pasture and not get anything else. And these are farms that have culled extremely hard. I know the individuals that are out there that put out the videos. I watch their videos as well, where they tell you about how their animals are worm resistant and they never worm. Well, guess what, folks? Those individuals have eliminated every single animal from their flock that had a worm load over the years. So that means every spring when these individuals get an animal that gets a worm load or anything else, they are gone. They have purposely bred this into their flocks. That is what is required if you're going to live that kind of a life. Same thing with their grain. If they don't get an animal that has a good feed conversion ratio, they are gone. That does not apply to most of you that are watching this video today. So this kind of is that caveat that goes along with the antibiotics and the grain and the vaccinations and the wormers and everything else. I appreciate the idea that once upon a time these animals lived out in the wild and grazed on their own and did perfectly fine, but for all intents and purposes, those days are over. And unless you are specifically raising them over a long period of time to be that way, you need to flush that idea out of your head and get on board with doing things and treating these animals as if they are the domesticated animals that they actually are. All right, next point. Do not ever make a bottle baby unless there's some reason why you have to. You should be focused on learning how to graft to surrogate mothers and not make bottle babies. I don't know what the deal is. I guess I know what the deal is. There's some people out there that they really want a bottle baby, and I see them online. They're like, I want a bottle baby. Does anyone have a bottle baby? They've got it in their head that they want to go through this bottle feeding process because it's cute and it's fun, and they like the idea of bottle feeding an animal. And there are breeders out there that will purposely take a baby off of the mom and give it to someone as a bottle baby when there's no reason that they need to do so. as a producer, as an individual that raises livestock, you need to be honest with your customers, and you need to tell them the truth. And the truth is that a baby that is naturally weaned off of their mom is far healthier every day of the week than a bottle baby will ever be. And you know that if you're raising animals, you know that's true. And I know some of you will sell bottle babies to make a little bit of extra money, and you know the damage that you're doing, and you know you're setting these people up for failure. Do not purposely make bottle babies. It's hard on the baby. The baby's not going to be as healthy. It screws them up. I don't think that they become as good of mothers in the future. I think that, historically we've had a lot of issues with them being sick. I think it goofs up their rumen. And the other thing is it's horrible on mom, and it's horrible on mom's bag. You got a doe or a ewe that's in full milk, and now all of a sudden you're pulling the baby off of them, and you can end up in serious trouble. Now, are there situations where you need to do this? Absolutely. That's not what I'm saying. If you have a mom that has triplets and she can't feed one of them, absolutely, you can go that route. If you have a mom that gets mastitis or mom that's sick or whatever, sure, I understand that. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is you've got a mom with a healthy single or healthy twins, and somebody throws some cash your way, and you pull those babies or a baby off of that mom, you're just a bad person. I don't know what else to say. Like, that is a bad idea. Please don't do it. For those of you that don't know any better and you're getting started now, if you're buying a bottle baby, there's nothing wrong with buying a bottle baby, but I do not, under any circumstances, condone pulling healthy babies off of healthy moms just so you can go through the bottle feeding experience. There's plenty of orphan babies out there that you can get your hands on and do some good and help raise them so they have a good life, but by all means, don't do it on purpose. All right, point number 10. Don't batten down the hatches too hard during the winter time. And I know this is a difficult thing for a lot of you to wrap your heads around, and I get it. I understand. You love your animals. You want them to be healthy and happy. And I understand that with all the points that we've talked about today. I know a lot of you are coming from a very, very good place with your heart and with your mind, and you want to do the best for your animals. And I appreciate that. And unfortunately, sometimes these things get skewed. We've all done it. We've all taken bad advice. I've taken bad advice. And we've done some silly things in the past as we've gone through the years with raising animals. And I'm not trying to hold that against anyone. The whole point of us telling you these things today is to try to help you. We're not trying to insult anyone or hurt anyone's feelings. And again, I understand, for most of you, your heart and your mind is coming from a good place, and you're just trying to do what's best. With that being said, there's this instinctive pull in all of us during the winter months, during the cold winter months, to really lock these animals up tight, keep them warm, and keep them comfortable. The reality of it is goats and sheep just don't respond well to that, especially from a respiratory health standpoint. They need fresh air. That's very, very important to help keep their lungs nice and clear. And what you'll find is if you really lock them up too tight during the wintertime and you keep it warm with artificial heat and things like that, is you're going to find that a lot of your flock is going to come down with respiratory illnesses like pneumonia, and it's going to cause a whole lot of problems. So what I want you to focus on during the winter months is this: as long as they have a place that they can get out of the wind, and as long as they have a place that they can get out of precipitation, snow, sleet, things like that, rain, they're going to be just fine. Now, there is a time and a place for heat lamps, for sick babies or babies that are really struggling. We have times here in Indiana where we're at 20 below zero, and we've got babies that are hitting the ground. And yeah, there's a time and a place for everything. But for all intents and purposes, they need lots and lots of airflow. The funny thing is a lot of you that have been doing this for a while, this is true. You'll have a heat lamp or have something up and it's 2 degrees outside, and you come outside and all your animals are out standing in the cold, looking around, having a good old time. And meanwhile, you got a heat lamp that's burning with no one at all anywhere near it. And we've all seen that happen many a times. They just don't need it in most cases. And in most cases, most people don't use them. With that being said, I guess an honorable mention that I want to talk to you about is, with a lot of this, is keep an open mind. Keeping an open mind is That's funny. I've got a ambulance or a fire truck or something going, and the call duck hears it, and I guess it decided it wanted to talk to the ambulance. Open mind, keeping an open mind, very, very important. There's very few things on our farm that I throw up my hands and say, well, I will never do this, or I will never do that. And you know, we talked about that at length today. We talked about antibiotics, we talked about wormers, we talked about medications, we talked about grain, we talked about a lot of different things. And while there is a place for some of the I won't do it most of the time kind of mentality, I always want you to keep an open mind as far as the possibility that you may have to use a chemical wormer at some point. You may have to use an antibiotic at some point. The other thing is you have to be willing to change. You have to be willing to evolve. You, just like me, are going to learn new things over time, and as you learn those new things, you have to be willing to implement them. Try not to be so rigid that your mindset is stuck on this is the way I do things all the time, to where you're not willing to consider other avenues. We change all the time. That's why our videos change all the time, and we try to keep you up to speed on things. With that being said, I hope you all have a very, very happy Thanksgiving. Our very best here at Linessa Farms to you and your family. We appreciate everything that you do for us. I'm Tim from Linessa Farms Specialty and Heirloom Livestock, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.